Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Liberated Panda with your co-host, Angel, and myself, Jason. This week, we're going to be talking about two of the hottest developments of this week. First, let's talk about COVID-19 and the new information that's being released in connection with that. Angel, is there any more to the leak lab theory that we talked about the last few weeks?
Yes. So the lead lax theory is gaining traction. Biden ordered intelligence agencies to investigate and report back on the origins of the COVID-19 virus, which has killed roughly 600,000 Americans and millions worldwide.
So what exactly does that mean for us here in America?
Well, surveys now shows a whopping 83% of Americans supporting taking action towards China if new intelligence reveals that the COVID-19 virus indeed did leak from the Wuhan lab. So if we can pull up that graph to show up our audience, and if we can't, it's fine. It just basically shows that it's 83% of the of Americans support some sort of retaliation or some sort of reaction if it indeed escaped from the Wuhan lab.
Which makes sense because 83% is a lot. I mean, you would think that a country releasing a pandemic would be a reason to take some form of action, right? Whether or not it's economic or something else. So what type of action do you think the Biden administration will take?
I personally don't know, and I don't even know if we'll ever know what the origin is, but I do know pursuant to the survey, 30% of voters support a global tax on Chinese products to make up for the economic damage sustained by the world in 2020, which makes sense to me. 25% support requesting China to pay reparations. The families of the dead are affected. 18% support imposing travel and financial sanctions on senior leaders of the Chinese Communist Party responsible for this potential virus leak. 6% support boycotting the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. 6% back other options. And finally, 15% prefer no action at all. So for me, personally, I support, boycotting Beijing. I support everything. But like China has sovereign immunity. And that means like countries really can't force it to do anything. So where do you stand on this issue, Jason?
I think we've sued other countries in court, and then we've used the power of our government, I believe, in order to extract those fines because they've been able to represent themselves. So I would think that even though I sometimes not the biggest fan of our legal system, I think that in this case, maybe those affected should probably bring a class action lawsuit. And then our government has the opportunity that they could go after the Chinese government via sanctions and stuff for some form of reparations and other stuff. But we'll never get what we're owed because we had to shut down an economy. People's lives were ruined,
And people are dead. So I just want to correct a little bit of a misconception. So there's something called there's an international court. The reason why nobody talks about the international court very often is because at least according it's laughable, right? It has no power because every country is its own sovereignty and no other country can force it to do anything. So, let's just say I'm China, you're USA, we litigate, I lose because I'm China and I'm forced to pay back $1 billion to you. Like, there's no way for you to enforce it unless we go into war, right? So I personally don't think we'll ever know or not know anytime soon what, the origins of COVID-19. But I hope we do find out because China is doing us a huge disservice by not allowing us to determine the origins of the disease so we can effectively study and fight the next coronavirus, heaven forbid. So,
right. I mean, our own government, though, too, also shut down probes into it. And the Biden administration recently came out saying they're going to have a 60-day or 6-month probe, something like that. And, honestly, when you put time constraints on it, it makes me think you might be hiding something. So you're right. Maybe we might not know.
Yeah.
We're looking to wait off the clock.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't think there's a statute of limitations, but I feel like, maybe some people come out or say, maybe US is involved, who knows, but I'm not, we're not going to get into like conspiracy theories here, but it is a bit of a mystery as to why China itself doesn't want to have the same goals, because us as humans, we all want to prevent the next coronavirus, right? But enough about, all of that. There's also more COVID related news, and it has to do with Fauci. This week's all we've been hearing about are these Fauci's leaked emails. Jason has the latest on the newest developments on the Fauci emails.
I honestly don't even know where to start with this. It's nuts. So the other day, I think it was, Wednesday, right? The outlet BuzzFeed published the result of a Freedom of Information Act, also known as FOIA request, where basically you petition the government for documents. All the documents of presidents, all these public servants are actually public documents. That's what a lot of people don't know. They're not privy to any privacy laws unless if there is some information that needs to be redacted for national security or various clearance levels, which in these emails they are. So this isn't just like a WikiLeaks, some guy dropping some Fauci emails because he was mad at him because he didn't get a promotion at work. This is verifiable, legitimate from the government, which is a very interesting point. But I'm going to start with a couple of these emails. They span from January to June of 2020.
Wait, just really quickly on the file thing. I just want to let everyone know that like at anyone out there listening, they can file for what Jason's talking about, the Freedom of Information
Freedom of Information Act. So, for example, you could file to learn about UFOs. They might release a page that is all black and say, "Here's your FOIA file," which they have done for people regarding UFOs before. But they would actually approve your request. Now, the judge would say, "Hey, you have to release it," and the government would be like, "Okay, well, this is all redacted," and you would get a black printer sheet, which, like I said, has happened. So, they have to release these documents at some point. So I'm going to go into a couple of the smoking guns here that are the worst documents.
Can we pull up the emails if we can? If we can't, that's okay. Yeah, if we can pull them up, that'd be great. But Jason, why don't you go ahead and start talking about it, and I'll see if I can pull it up.
Yeah, I'll start from the top. I honestly think the biggest one, January the 31st, Dr. Fauci received an email from researcher Christian G. Anderson, who clearly states when talking about whether or not the virus is man-made, he says, quote, "We have a good team lined up to look very critically at this, so we should know much more at the end of the weekend." This is January the 31st, 2020, mind you. I should mention that after our discussion today, and then he names the members of his team, all of us find the genome to be inconsistent with expectations of evolutionary theory. So what he's saying is that the virus didn't evolve from bats. Bats were a reservoir, which he admits in another email. But Dr. Anderson does not believe that that the virus evolved naturally.
Interesting. Right.
He's pretty consistent that there was some sort of man-made gain of function in there.
Right.
There's another email. Let me pull it up here. There's another email here from Saturday, February the 1st, Dr. Fauci with a Hugh Ochinoklos from NIH, just like him.
Right.
He says, the paper you sent me says the experiments were performed before the gain of function pause because the NIH had paused the gain of function, as we talked about before. Gain of function was basically increasing viruses that occur naturally in nature in animals to increase their functionality in humans. So now you're basically turning them into a bioweapon. Before the gain of function pause, but have been reviewed and approved by the NIH. So the U.S. federal government paused gain of function tests a while ago. I'm not sure the exact year. The email keeps going. Not sure what this means since Emily is sure that no coronavirus work has gone through the P3 framework. She will try to determine if we have any distant ties to this work abroad, meaning the work at the Wuhan lab. That is damning. And Rand Paul mentioned this a few weeks ago in his testimony, which we talked about, that there was, through possible grants from third parties, some sort of distant funding. So Rand was on top of this.
So Jason, let me ask you, I think you mentioned to me something about like masks not being necessary, and that was also part of the emails as well.
Oh yeah, this is a fun one. That was going to be my next email.
Oh, okay. Great minds think alike.
Ooh. Actually, there's so many of these. There's one from a Sylvia. Oh yeah. Anthony Fauci to Sylvia Burwell.
Do you want to give us like a synopsis?
Yeah, a couple quick questions. Well, I'm going to read this one because this one's good. She says, Sylvia, masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring the infection. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material.
Interesting.
It might, however, provide some slight benefit in keeping out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. I do not recommend that you wear a mask, particularly since you are going to a very low risk location. Your instincts are correct. Money is best spent on medical countermeasures such as diagnostics and vaccines. Safe travels, best regards, Tony. That would be Dr. Fauci. So much of what was talked about the virus does pass through all those masks. Period. End of story. The hope is that the viral particles that are in droplets do get caught up in the mask, just like he stated perfectly in that email, which some end up in droplets. So you do get less out. But the fact of the matter is, you're still kind of seeing the same thing.
Right. So these sounds like we're going to be like hearing a lot more as these emails begin to be analyzed by people, correct?
We will. And let me just give a quick synopsis, because I think the bigger picture here, when you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, is that these are FOIA requests. So the government released them. The government didn't redact this. And you have to ask yourself the question, why didn't they redact this? And it looks like they're trying to throw Fauci under the bus. I can't say I disagree with them. It probably is a good move. When you look at what the conversation has started from ordinary Americans being curious about origins of this virus and everything that they've been told maybe could be a lie, which we're hearing now. I mean, how many of these things are a lie? I mean, what else is a lie, right? And the big thing is why now, and why is this happening? I think that the Rand Paul testimony, for example, was a big step in putting that out there. And now we're at a point where maybe this administration kind of can't bottle that genie back up. Not that they could before, but they were kind of holding it on. But right now, it's definitely the cat's out of the bag, genie's out of the bottle. And honestly, I think that Fauci's just going to be their fall guy for him.
Right. No,
shaping up.
I agree. And I wonder if Fauci's reputation will suffer a blow for this in the long run. I'm sure it will, but who knows with today's 24/7 news cycle, right? So I guess moving on from Fauci, let's go back to China for a second. Anyway, Biden just signed an executive order banning American investment into some Chinese companies. So Biden signed an EO banning investment into 59 Chinese companies, which expands on the EO, the executive order that Trump signed, banning investment in 51 Chinese companies. So
why? Like, what's the use of this?
So why the new ban, right? Like, why suddenly is this happening? So Biden expanded this ban on American investing companies with purported links to Chinese military, which of course angers Beijing. And also, I just want to add, so many of Chinese companies are tied to the military because they're tied to the CCP, and they're all kind of like interconnected. So,
effectively every Chinese company is tied to the Chinese military.
Right. I mean, we're not allowed to say that, obviously, but that's like that's like the thought process. But we're not allowed to say that, but that's like a lot of people would naturally, come to that conclusion.
All right,
but again,
I take that statement back, but everybody can judge for themselves.
Right. Like everyone can just, critically think and just wonder whether it's yes or no. Of course, this really, really angered Beijing, because at this point, what doesn't anger Beijing, right? But, I don't who cares if Beijing is angry? They're always angry. And
their panties are in a bunch all the time.
Yeah, they're super sensitive people. So you want to hear something funny, Jason? Yeah. So now, basically, the Chinese government came out and they said, and I quote, "The U.S. should respect the rule of law and the market, correct its mistakes, and stop actions that undermine the global financial market order and investors' lawful rights and interests. And this was said by the spokesman, Wang Wenbing, who told reporters in Beijing. And if we could pull up that graphic, that would be great. If we can't, that's fine. So how ridiculous is this statement? China is angry at America, which is doing exactly what China has been doing for decades. As our audience may or may not know, there are several sectors in China that foreigners are not allowed to invest in. China has been expanding the sectors that foreign investors are allowed to invest in, but still, like there's there's like Class A, Class B stocks, and foreigners can't invest in like Class A stocks. So
Right.
and on top of that, rather than let Twitter, Facebook, and other tech companies compete in China, they just copied America's tech model and refuse to let American tech companies even come in. So it's funny to me that they're mad because America is like kind of copying their model. We're not even close to copying their model. Oh, and now the infographic came up. So yeah, so it's just ridiculous. What do you think, Jason?
I mean, it definitely is. It's projection at its finest. But what do you expect from the CCP, right? That's pretty much, as they say, par for the course. They just want to invest everywhere, and they want to get their tentacles in every country, in every nation, and every people. And they don't want the same thing to happen to them because they know their own playbook, right? They know what they're trying to do, and they don't want somebody to do it to them, which is actually really smart on their part. But I mean, whoever believes them, I mean, joke's on you, right?
Yeah. So I'm just going to say one last thing because we were running out of time for today. I think that it's great. America's starting to do this. I hope all countries start to do stuff like this because like it's going to level the playing field, and maybe, who knows, it might even make China rethink its entire model. Who knows, right? So that's the hope, and I'm glad that the world is finally waking up to this. So do you have any final thoughts before we go, Jason?
No, I just think we're in for some interesting times right now. I'm sure the Fauci emails will continue to develop, and more stuff's going to develop. We're in a hyper sort of news cycle where things are happening so fast. So
yeah, that's exactly it. So that was our, our 30-minute live show, which usually happens every Wednesday. But this week it's on Thursday. So sometimes Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, but always at 6 p.m. Eastern. We hope you join us next week right here on Second Gen's Liberated Panda. Have a great week, you guys. Bye.
thanks, everyone. Bye.